Let's now talk about something called destructuring. So destructuring gives us a very convenient way to extract data from a data structure like an object or an array. So imagine that we had an array filled with some data and that we now wanted to store each of the elements of that array in a single variable. So let's start again with doing it in ES5, right? And let's first write our array. So a very simple array, just with the name and the age of John, okay, and 26. So if we wanted to store each of the elements in a separate variable, we would simply have to write one variable for each element, just like this. So the name, and it's the first element of John, so 0, and then a variable for the age, and John 1. Okay, so now we have both elements in separate variables. Now imagine that we had like 5 or 10 elements in that array, then it would become a bit impractical to do this every time like this, right? And so in ES6 we have something called destructuring once again. And it would work like this. So ES6 now. So with destructuring we can destructure a data structure just like this. So we create a new variable, and then in here we put name and year, and then we put our array in here, so John and 26. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a constant called name and a constant called year, and then this data will be stored in each of the variables. So let's actually check that. So console.log with the name and with the year, and actually should be age. Okay, so let's check it out. Okay, the problem here is of course that I already used the variable called name before, right? So let's just get rid of this, and now it's gonna work, of course. Okay, so again we destructured this data structure here using this kind of syntax here. So it's like the opposite of constructing a data structure. So with this here we build a data structure, and then with this syntax here we destruct it. And this actually also works with objects. So imagine we had an object, simply gonna call it obj. So first name and last name as usual, right? And now destructuring works in the exact same way. All we have to make sure is that the keys actually match with our new variable names. So let's do that. And now it's an object, and so we use the curly braces here, of course, because the object is also constructed like that. So that's also how we destruct it, okay? So we write first name and last name. And remember that these keys here have to be the exact same thing here. So these new variable names have to match the keys. Now we just say object. And that's it. Now we created two brand new constants which store the data out of the object. Let's just very quickly check that. First name and last name. And here we go. Now, if we don't want the variable names to match with the key names, then we can also use different names. And it's going to work simply like this. So again, we use the curly braces. Then we say first name A. For example, if you want the variable to be called A, and then last name B equal object, and that's it. So let's just quickly see if we have the same. And yeah, again, it's John Smith here. Okay, So this is how destructuring works. But let's now see a more practical application of destructuring. And a very good application is to actually return multiple values from a function. So in a more easier way than we used to do before. So at ES5, usually if we had more than one value that we wanted to return from a function, we would simply return an object. But now with destructuring, it got a bit easier. So let's try that out. So let's create a function that returns the age of a person as well as the remaining time for retirement. So we used that before, but now we're going to use both of these concepts in the same function, okay? So function calc age and retirement. And that's based on a year that we input. So const age. So let's now create a new date here, okay? So that our year is always up to date. So get full year instead of simply using 2016 or something like that. So instead of hard coding it here, minus the input year. So let's now return both of the age and the years until retirement. And so we simply return an array with these data. So age and then 65 minus the age. So supposing that 65 is the age at which we can retire. Could be something different, but let's assume it's 65, okay? So we used that before, and so that's how we do it here. All right, so this returns an array, and now all we have to do is to use destructuring in order to store this into different variables. So we want age and retirement. And this is of course the result of calling the function with, let's say, 1990. So we're now going to have two different return values. Let's just take a look at them. Age and of course the retirement. Okay, so we have already used a variable called age. Let's just call it age2 here. It really doesn't matter, right? Okay, and now it works. So these are the two return values that come from our function. So destructuring is a good solution for this particular case, and we're actually going to see more applications of destructuring, at least one more later in the course. So stay tuned and come with me right to the next lecture.